So guys, I just finished reading the new Ultimate Spider-Man issue 1 of Miles Morales being the new Spider-Man. Now, of course you don't get to see him as Spider-Man, but the cover shows this is Miles Morales' costume as the new Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, let me tell you guys that I have never, excuse me again, sorry, I have never ever read a Ultimate Spider-Man comic book, and I want to get into it, so I am planning to get more Ultimate Spider-Man comic books, because then, you can't really get the issues. Well, it cost me a lot of money, but I'm only going to get the collected ones, the volumes that collect every single issue, so I'm going to get those. But I picked this up because I heard, of course, that Peter Parker from the Ultimate series has died. Ultimate Spider-Man Peter Parker is dead. And now, Miles Morales is going to take his mantle. Now, there has been a lot of arguments between, people hating on Miles Morales because he's half black and half Hispanic, I think. And people are arguing, saying that, it's racist and stuff like that and blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't have a black Spider-Man. But I digress. I don't have a problem with it. I know Peter Parker was the original Spider-Man, and to have them kill off Peter Parker to introduce Miles Morales, I find it maybe it was kind of a little bit iffy because you're killing off Peter Parker just to get more readers, but people's got to take risks, and this risk was a good thing to do because I absolutely love this issue. This first issue was great. Now, that's only speaking from my point of view because I just started reading Ultimate Spider-Man. This is my first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, my first ever Marvel comic. So, speaking of which, I love this comic. It started off with Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, who is talking to a scientist who he wants to recreate the spider formula that, gave Peter Parker his powers. And he is, experimenting on all these different spiders. So there's this spider with a number on its butt, 42. And, Norman Osborn is telling this scientist to find that formula and stuff like that. And if he doesn't, he will kill him. Or, he told him that he was the one who created Spider-Man. That, and then it was really great, actually. There's actually the first part of the comic, he actually talks about Athena and Arachne, who talks about how Athena turned Arachne into a spider, and that's how he's trying to implement that he created Spider-Man, that he was Athena, and Peter Parker was, Arachne, that he turned, Peter Parker into Spider-Man. So that was a great little mythology there. I really like mythology, and that was really great. And then, the story talks that later on shows like a newspaper article about Norman Osborn getting caught and arrested and is in S.H.I.E.L.D. custody because of his, because he's Green Goblin, and they figured out and, they arrested him. And Norman Osborn isn't there anymore. And then it shows later on this guy in a suit. Now, this guy in this costume, he is infiltrating the Oscorp company, and his mask awfully looks like Deadpool. I thought it was Deadpool the first time I saw him, but it wasn't Deadpool. So you'll figure out later on when I talk about it. He goes into the corporation, and he's stealing stuff. And before he infiltrated it, the scientist was putting back the spider into its box, number 42 box. But of course, whoops, he forgot to close the door on the box, and the spider crawled out. And as this burglar is robbing through, just stealing all the jewelry from the safe, the safe. Sorry, blacked out for a second, but yeah, he's stealing jewelry from the safe, and the spider crawls into his bag, and then you'll figure out what happens later on. Now, what's interesting is now introducing Miles Morales. His parents are taking him to a lottery auction thing to get him into a charter school, and he's saying that he's one kid out of 700 applicants. And now you know how charter schools, they have to, check your. I thought that you had to check the person's transcript before you can transfer to that school, or before you can get into that school, and you have to look at your records and stuff like that. But this charter school didn't do that. They just did a lottery, and basically, if you won, you got into the school. And Miles, thought that he wasn't going to make it, and he shouldn't go and stuff like that. But finally, the last number's called, and guess what the number is? 42. Okay. But yeah, they called out the number 42, and it says, Miles Morales, you were the last kid to get into our school, and his parents are excited and happy and stuff like that. And Miles looks around and he sees a bunch of these kids, that aren't getting into the school, and he feels, he feels for them. He feels bad for them that they're not able to get in. He actually says that look at all these kids, they should be the one getting in, not me, and stuff like that. And that was a good character development about Miles, that he's not, a kid that's just a jerk. And, he's a caring kid. That's a great way to express how he's going to be the new Spider-Man, how his personality and feelings will go into becoming Spider-Man. And, he goes to see his uncle, and obviously this uncle, you see a bag of jewelry and money, and of course, none other than his uncle was the guy who stole the jewelry and had the spider crawl into his bag. He was the robber. And, Miles is sitting down, he's looking through his stuff, and, he's telling his uncle about how he got into charter school, and, his uncle's proud of him. And, he tells him, that they express that he's not supposed to be able to see his uncle. And, his parents don't like his uncle, he shouldn't even be there. And, Miles is sitting there, and, they grab a couple popsicles, eat it together, and sure enough, the spider crawls out of the bag and bites Miles Morales in the hand. And there we go. Spider-Man, or the new Ultimate Spider-Man, is made. But, he has a blackout. He faints, and his uncle calls his father. His father comes in and starts arguing with his uncle. And Miles doesn't like it. And actually it shows, that, besides Peter Parker, how Peter Parker, he was a young kid. He had so much problems, as a kid. He has to deal with school, with Aunt May, Mary Jane, and being Spider-Man. Now Miles Morales, introduced that he has family trouble too. Maybe his uncle might play a role in this series. Maybe not. Who knows? Maybe his uncle might die, just like Uncle Ben. I don't know, but it seems like his uncle and Miles Morales are pretty close. But what's interesting about this issue is what separates Miles Morales from Peter Parker is after he got the bite and he woke up, guess what happens? After his father and uncle are still arguing and stuff like that, Miles suddenly disappears. Where'd he go? And his father, is wondering where he went, and his uncle says, well, he ran away. And then turns out Miles was, under these steps near the house, and his father's screaming out his name and stuff like that, looking for him. And Miles says, Dad, I'm right here. And then he's like, wait, no. He gets up, and sure enough, his body is half visible. He's invisible. So does this spider bite just give him new abilities? That's really interesting. That's great. He can turn invisible. That's one aspect that he's different from Peter Parker. This is really getting interesting. I'm getting issue 2 when it comes out on September 28th, I think. This is September 28th. I am really interested in getting this. I really like this issue. I highly recommend you guys getting it and reading it. Who cares if Spider-Man's black? Just read it for the story. I know the character isn't Peter Parker, but try to check it out. Don't hate on it. You can't judge a book by its cover. Read a comic is really great. I highly recommend it, okay? And I'll talk to you guys later.